Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, Aston Villa are FA Cup quarter finalists. Aston Villa 2, Cardiff City nil. That was much needed after the sort of doom and gloom and the frustrations around Tuesday.
Oh, mate, absolutely, absolutely. It was very much needed, very much needed. I don't think quite full redemption yet. I still don't think it was maybe as convincing as we'd quite have liked. But we're through to the next round. That's the main thing. 2-0 war looks comfortable on paper, and whilst I do think they've got some way to remedy what's left quite a bitter taste in the mouth from early midweek. I think we've gone into the weekend. It's nice to have it signed, sealed, and delivered. And we'll await to see who will play in the quarterfinals.
These Friday games are always a bit like they have the potential to ruin your whole weekend.
Yeah.
So I'm just glad that we got the business done. It's Saturday morning now, but we'll still be buzzing on this tomorrow as well, I'm sure. And rightfully so, because obviously we've come into a nice little. It's the end really of the busy part of the season for us, I guess, with Champions League coming back on Tuesday, going back to Bruges. But we'll touch on that on another day. I think when you look on paper, 66% possession, 25 shots. This could have been way more than 2-0. So right from the get-go, have to give Cardiff the plaudits that, I think they deserve. I think they defended really well. They put bodies in front of almost every shot that we had managed to make yesterday. And, I think given where they're sat in the championship and the struggles that they've had this season, they knew that if they were going to be in this tie, they had to defend for their lives. And for the most part, they did. And I think they did really well just to keep it at 2-0 with a lot of the chances that we created, mate.
I think we it was a really odd game actually, and we've kind of throughout the last few games as well, we've created actually quite a high volume of chances, and we both kind of came out of Tuesday night and we're like, well, obviously the scoreline doesn't look great, but there's a parallel universe where we actually scored, 3 or 4 goals, and whilst that still wouldn't have been enough to win the game, we do look. Ali doesn't quite look as clinical as maybe he had. He had a few chances. There's call it a one-on-one. There's kind of chance in the first half where it comes over his right shoulder. The goalkeeper's on rushing and he just stabs it wide of the post. I think the flag went up in the end, but he wasn't actually offside. It would have counted. And then there's another one where the ball kind of drops to him about, 5-6 yards out, and he kind of stabs it straight into the keeper. And again, we're creating a high volume of chances, but I'm just not sure that we ever really looked like scoring a few. Really last night, given kind of how Cardiff came into the game and their own form, and the comments from their gaffer before the game, kind of saying that this fixture just isn't a priority for them at the moment. This was a good opportunity to go and kind of set Tuesday night right and go and score a hatful of goals. And whilst I don't think that's definitely beyond this Villa team, the kind of only two players, and this is kind of my overall takeaway from last night, the only two players that really look like, clinical and able to put the ball in the back of the net at the moment or to create chances for where players can do that are Marco Asensio and Marcus Rashford. And actually, that's kind of my main takeaway from last night, mate, is that it's beginning to look like Villa's season is probably going to hinge on those two players and how good they can be until May. And obviously, other players will pitch in and stuff like that. And, it's nice to be able to give Morgan a rest last night. Shame that I think last night probably was penciled in a game for Daniel Marlin, but he wasn't able to start. I'm assuming there's a knock there because I don't think he was on the bench either. But yeah, Villa look, it's pretty crazy actually, given the wealth of attacking options that we have, how much money we spent on the summer, that it's actually two loan players that we've picked up in January that could well end up defining exactly where we place in May. Marco Asensio is now Villa's primary goal threat. I think Marcus Rashford, has done so well to pick up so many assists. And, one of the things we first remarked on when we first saw those players is how they kind of look like they're on their own wavelength. And we've got some fantastic players in this squad, but actually that those two are just kind of operating on a different level to anyone else in the Villa squad. And I think as the games go by, you see that more and more. And it's why we were so confused, I think, that they didn't come on earlier than they did on Tuesday, because we have so quickly gotten to a place where we're just kind of hanging our hat on those guys. And had they not come on, I do think last night could have looked quite different for Villa, actually. And like, I'm not saying that we would have been dumped out or anything like that, but, we were getting, when did we score? Like 60, 65, 70 minutes, kind of around that mark.
Yeah.
Or, if you go on another 5, 10 minutes without a goal there, had those lads not come on, all of a sudden that tie does look completely different. And so, yeah, I'm very glad that we have them. And I do just think it shows the importance of how important those two guys are going to be until the end of the season.
Absolutely. That was so Asensio's first goal was the third time that Rashford has assisted an Asensio goal so far this season, which is just freakish. As you say, these are two guys that are on the same wavelength, and it's great to see because, as you said, mate, I think we are gonna. I don't want to say unfortunately have to rely on them because they're bloody good players, but they're they're not our players, and you know where we end up in come the end of the season will determine future of these two guys. And there was all the reports yesterday, I think it was coming out from the Sun, that Rashford wants to stay at Villa, which is great. I think a lot of that will be dictated by the finances, which in turn will be dictated by whether we finish in European places. And even to go more granular, it will be determined as to whether it's a Champions League rather than the Europa League or even the Conference League. So I don't want to be like dour and sort of put the mood down and be like, enjoy it while we can, Villa fans. But as you say, mate, they are the two that are looking dangerous at the moment, and long may it continue. I think it's just Asensio is such a classy player, and he's got so much experience, so much know-how, and we've followed Real Madrid fairly closely for a very long time, mate. So we've always sort of known the ability that Marco Asensio has. But with players like this, you need to see them play for your team week in, week out. You need to almost see them up close and personal, whether that's in the flesh or on the TV every week, because like it's little things that these guys are doing. Like every time, yeah, we've known for a long time with Rashford in particular. It's pretty clear that he doesn't want to play through the middle. He wants to have that space out on the left and drive inside, cut in with his right foot, score, assist, whatever. We know that that's Rashford's game, right? But it's the intelligence that both him and Asensio have. Asensio is almost always in the right place at the right time to receive the ball off Rashford. And that's a skill in itself, because most of the time Rashford's double marked. He's got to, think quickly on his feet, which, we've seen so often. He's nutmegging players without even, a second thought. He's getting to the byline, he's getting crosses in. But, you look at this one, it's a ball played over the top again. First time cut back, finds Asensio. Asensio's there. He knows where he needs to be. And both of his finishes very similar actually in this game. First one, Ethan Horvath, bless him, couldn't even get anywhere near it. It happened too quick for him. Give him a shout out as well because he was phenomenal. I think Horvath had a really good game. I think BBC gave him man of the match, which I can totally understand when we had 25 shots and it was only 2-0. I think he played a blinder, but this just goes to show the levels. Like it took two really good, really quick goals, quickly taken rather than in succession, from Asensio to sort of get the better of Cardiff here. But it was comfortable all night, mate. It was one. I have to admit, there was a point at around 60 minutes I thought, I really don't want this to go to extra time and penalties. Like this is the last thing that both teams want. Especially, I don't think we made a substitute until the 82nd minute, which is
Yeah.
extremely unlike Unai Emery. So that in itself tells me that Emery wanted the players that started the game to go and get the job done. And maybe if that had happened earlier, we would have seen these substitutes earlier, and it could have been a totally different game. There could have been more goals. We could have conceded whatever. But ultimately, he put the faith in the players to go and get the job done, and they did.
Yeah, and hey, like that, that team is more than capable of kind of going and beating. This is wasn't much of a rotated side at all, was it really?
No.
That is, that's a team that we've seen, some weekends, and so it's it's good objectively that we did go and get the win. But yeah, I think we weren't in a position really when you look at the bench. We have a lot of injury problems at the moment. It's not as strong a bench as we've seen previously. Again, kind of a couple of goalkeepers. We were a man shorter in terms of substitutes than Cardiff were, and so yeah, I think it was a good game. I'd say it's one where it was comfortable. You're absolutely right. Like it never really felt. It always felt like we were going to be the side that went on to win the game. It was just when we did that, absolutely, mate. And the longer that you go, the more of a lottery that becomes. They only had one shot on target. We had 60% and 68% of the ball, as you rightly say, 604 passes to their 286. Like it was 12 corners to their zero. Like, as you say, Villa were on top for the whole game, but it is slightly alarming that we just don't be able to seem to convert these kind of opportunities and this much of the ball out into A, goals and B, wins as maybe we should be doing. Like, and it was the same on Tuesday night, right? I think again we had like 65% of the ball. So again, we're kind of sat there on, I'll pull up the exact set now. Yeah, 65% possession. We made almost double the amount of passes that Crystal Palace did, and they managed to carve out 4 goals to our one. And so this is something that probably does need to be an area of focus. But I think the other important thing to say is, mate, and boss, it was only Cardiff. There's a clean sheet in there as well. And, I kind of crack a wry smile. I don't want to celebrate that too much. But, Emi Martinez referenced it in his, Instagram caption. Like, it's a big deal that, like, Cardiff never really looked like scoring. There's a kind of penalty shout in the first half when Bogard catches Perry and G. I think if you're sat there with the blue that was up on last night, you might feel slightly aggrieved. I think it was a little bit soft and probably one that wasn't going to get overturned, but one of those where, to use an old cliche, like you've seen them given, and so but again, a clean sheet, that's a good thing. And, despite Anwar El Ghazi's best efforts, to hell bent on scoring last night, bless him, I think he wanted one more goal in front of the Holte, particularly in the first half. And so, yeah, like there are definitely more positives than negatives. I do think it's a shame that Daniel Marlin couldn't play because it did seem like a really good opportunity for him to get up and running. And we go into some pretty tough games recently where you imagine Ollie's going to be the one to get the nod. Obviously, he can't even play on Tuesday in the Champions League, and so you're already looking at the very earliest another week before he can kind of open his account, and so you don't want that to rumble on too long. So it's a shame that he couldn't feature last night. But equally, Ollie probably needs a couple of goals after having a couple of chalked off midweek. So yeah, but hey, as you rightly say, mate, Marco and Marcus just on a different tier, and maybe a kind of illustration of just what, like, in real time we're seeing in our team the difference between Villa and maybe some of those clubs on the top tier who have kind of 6, 7, 8 players of that caliber in their starting 11 at any one time.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think at the end of the day, it's not inherently a bad thing that we're relying on these guys, because
Yeah.
when you look at how the season's gone so far, and I like we struggle to score goals, don't we? Like it's clear that there hasn't really been an outlet this season. I think a lot of people, I think, are more aware of it now than they were at the time, but we really miss Moussa Diaby. We miss that pace. We miss the directness that he brings to the team. But um, I mean, Ollie, how many get? Ollie's got 12 goals, I believe. Morgan's got 7. Duran has 7, but he's not around. Ross Barkley's got 3. Tillemans, Onana, a few. That they're all sort of languishing on 2 goals. We need somebody to step up, and Asensio's been here for 4 games and already got the same amount of goals as Onana and Tillemans individually this season. So ultimately, that's going to be the big difference maker, I think. And You know, like the goals they need to be evenly spread. You know, and again, you know, Diaby obviously scored a handful of goals. We lose Douglas Luiz, who I believe was at least 10 goals last season, albeit from penalties. But you know, it's not like they count for less, guys. A goal is a goal. So it's one of them, innit? Like we've just got to hope hope that Ollie can find his feet. There was another chance that you didn't mention, mate, was the second half where he sort of rounds Horvath. And
Yeah,
I'm just take it first time, Ollie. I'm the biggest Ollie Watkins defender, but that really infuriated me that he took it around the keeper and away from the goal in favour of the cutback for Marcus, which was blocked because they had about 10 bodies on the line. Back yourself. Ollie has time to take a touch and shoot, or to just he could have just shot first time. Just get it out of your feet. Um, and I don't want to dwell on it too much because again, you know, like my stance on Ollie has always been I think he's great. I do love him, but it is becoming a bit more infuriating now. But it's like you say, mate. It's the fact we've got Asensio and Rashford. It's almost like an insight into like, oh, this is what the top clubs have.
yeah.
Like, would Ollie Watkins play for PSG? Would Ollie Watkins play for Man? I mean, to be fair, Ollie Watkins would probably get in the Manchester United team right now and be their best player. But it's that level of cutthroatness, that level of you know clinicalness, really, that unfortunately, you know, as we've maintained for the longest time on the podcast, Ollie just doesn't have. So hopefully he can find some confidence. Hopefully he can find his feet and you know, with the game on Tuesday being as big as it is, with the narrative of you know we need revenge on Belgian turf. Hopefully he can find his scoring boots for them, mate. But I wanted to shout out Brugge again, just a wonderful player, a wonderful young man who has been thrust into some really difficult situations over the past 2 months in different positions in high pressure games, whether that's away at the Emirates in midfield or coming on against Celtic at right back, or even, you know, playing centre half as he has been for the past few weeks. What a talent. And, you know, it's clear that this kid's future in the game is absolutely massive, mate. And I don't mean to get ahead of myself or, you know, put any unnecessary pressure on Lamar per se, but and again, I don't want to get carried away with the fact, as you mentioned, it's Cardiff, right? We shouldn't be too, hey, like, you know, clean sheet. Quarterfinals is great, but we beat Cardiff at the end of the day, and that's, you know, no disrespect intended at all to any of the Bluebirds listening to this podcast. But Lamar is just a class act, and I look forward to seeing him more in his natural position in the midfield as and when opportunities present themselves. And I just think that a lot of the sort of narrative at the start of the season, you know, we were lacking a right back. Lamar was having to play there. People had written him off far too early for my liking. So I'm just really happy that he's sort of doing what he's doing, and you know he's stepped up and he's clearly a valuable member of the squad, mate.
He's literally the human personification of that meme, you know, it's like accidentally become important at work and I hate it.
Yeah.
Literally, like, kind of just stumbled into being like I think it's fair to say one of our more important players this season in just being a really willing, you know, the best ability, mate, is availability, as they say. I
Spot
think, you
on.
know, he's played at right back, centre back, DM. Like, he's played everywhere that we've kind of asked him to, and kind of, you know, seems to do so. And when you consider that it was only last season that, you know, he spent on loan at Bristol Rovers in League One, you know, only started, I think, 15 or 14 league games there. So, you know, didn't go and like anchor the defense or midfield for a whole season, like was kind of coming in and out of that team. For him to be kind of here, and, you know, it's not, you know, we kind of got to forget that, you know, he started that away with Leicester on the second weekend of the season. He started our first Champions League win, the 3-0 win over Young Boys. He has been really, really reliable throughout this season. And, come the end of the season awards, he's not going to pick up the Player of the Season award or anything like that. But I think he's quietly gone around, put in the 7 out of 10 every time that he's played. He's been consistent, he's been reliable considering how young he is. Mistakes have been minimal. And yeah, you really do have to praise him because it's been a hell of a rise for him kind of over the last 12 months, really, considering the standard of football that he was playing at, and has never really looked out of place. And so, yeah, you do have to throw him a huge amount of credit, mate. It would be one where I think, every time that he's included, and, no disrespect to Bogart, it's a kind of highlight of just how short we have been throughout this season and, do continue to be because, as you say, he's having to kind of fill in a different position every week. We've seen him come off the bench when, Tyrone's been injured and kind of come into difficult games and have to drop straight in at centre back. It's not easy. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right to throw him some praise, mate. And I think, we'll continue to see him playing in various roles until the end of the season. I think it'd be really, really interesting to kind of see what happens with him in the January window because, you can't imagine that this is a role in the squad that he'll be able to hold down. It doesn't seem that he's really been able to make a position his own because he is positioned as this utility player. So, yeah, what we kind of do with him over the next 12 months will be really, really interesting. But his stock will definitely have risen, mate. If we tried to sell last summer, it would have been to, a kind of Bristol Rovers. But now, when you look at kind of how important he's been, the caliber of game that he's played in, it's definitely done his career the world of good.
Was it Valencia or Sevilla, one of the two that was looking to try and bring him in late in the January window? So, it just goes to show you teams are taking notice. And I think it's one of them where, like, maybe it's because Lamar, sorry, was out on loan at Bristol Rovers, but there wasn't as much noise or buzz sort of around the club about him, and maybe that's just my ignorance. And he sort of slipped under the radar for me. But over sort of recent years, in and around the sort of same age group, we've had Cam, we've had Carney, we've had Ramsey Jr., we've had Amari Kellyman. There's been a whole bunch of other players that have been sort of spoken about, and I guess it sort of just does go to show really that the it's not always and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to Lamar at all, but it's not always the best players that have the breakthrough. It's the ones that persevere, the ones that aren't as flashy. It plays a different position as well to a lot of those guys that we mentioned as well. Obviously midfielder rather than being an attacking player. So there's difficulties sort of breaking through with that there as well. But it's absolutely a credit to Lamar and his ability. And we've got to give a shout out to Jamaldine Jimmo for coming on as well. Somebody who's been included in squads quite frequently this season on the bench. I think that was his first game. I don't remember him coming on against Spurs. Maybe he did. I know we brought on some guys from the academy, but that was a couple of weeks ago now, and I can't really remember. But yeah, I thought he looked really tidy, really tidy.
Yep.
A couple of nice passes. Played one through for JJ, I think it was, pretty late on. Anyone else, and they probably would have got a shot off. JJ's just kind of in this. I don't want to call it a rut, but I feel like JJ needs a goal, and then we're going to see the best of JJ. But it was a really good chance, nevertheless. And it's good to see that young guys are getting minutes and are being trusted by Unai, mate. And I guess rotation. I know it was pretty late on, but rotation was going to be important. The elephant in the room being Bruges on Tuesday, mate. We have to go, and we just have to get revenge. I say revenge as if Bruges did something to us. It was Tyrone. It was self-inflicted, but we need to leave there having dominated and scoring at least 2 goals, in my opinion, just to burn the memory of Tyrone handling the ball out of my mind.
It's crazy, I've just picked up the lineup from that game, and it's crazy how different our team will look. You imagine kind of going into into the Tuesday night game, and we played Tyrone and Diego at centre half. Buba was in midfield. We brought on John Duran, Emi Buendia, sorry, Kostin Nedeljkovic, like all of these guys, and all of a sudden, we're kind of going to be going back, and Marlon might feature, Asensio, Rashford. You imagine it's going to be a kind of new look in midfield. Andres Garcia, sorry, was could well fit. And hey, I think he's well deserving of another shout out as well, mate, for how he has shrugged that mistake against Liverpool. It's crazy how different our team could look, really. And so it was a real turgid game, wasn't it? Like that, it looked destined to end 0-0, and it was only really, neither side looked like creating anything. It was only really if someone made a mistake, and eventually it was Villa that either side was going to get a goal. And you imagine that because of how easily they turned over a really, really good side in Atalanta, that may well look different. And so we're absolutely going to have to bring our best, mate. But at least we'll be able to kind of throw them different problems, because the team that we put out last time just looked completely devoid of ideas. And so it's only a matter of time, really, when you look at how important Asensio and Rashford have been, that you can kind of keep bringing them on as super subs. Rashford's still awaiting that kind of, I think it made one start so far. So like, really needs to kind of be bedded into the first team now. Looks like he's had a few games to get under his belt. And so I just don't think, if we keep bringing these guys on at 60 minutes, we can't keep saving games in the last half an hour. We need to have these guys available for the full 90, because it's going to be a very, very tough game.
Yeah, and it's quite ironic, really, the fact that the defeat to Bruges had meant that we end up facing Bruges again in the Champions League. Because if we drew that game, our opponents would have been either Bayern Munich or Real Madrid. So maybe we should be a bit more gracious to Tyrone. Maybe we should thank Tyrone for what he did. But yeah, I just thought that's funny how it worked out with the draws and the points and who would end up playing who and all that. But guys, let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let us know if you're going to Bruges as well. Safe travels to everybody who is, and Dan and I will be back on the Tuesday night with a podcast straight after the game. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and up the Villa.